In Okinawa, Japan, from kindergarten to 12th grade, I attended an international Catholic school headed by Capuchin monks and Sisters of Notre Dame. By faith, I learned to fear my God and to see myself as unworthy and condemned to eternity if I did not believe I was sin. We old-time Catholics know well that message, which still resounds today. And being Chinese, my mother growing up was treated poorly and discounted as a human being and family member. Unfortunately, at the same time during my late grade school years, my family and I began experiencing many types of abuse from my father. The trauma, including my father's, was unspeakable and molded well into our lives, challenging us even to the present. Once after one of these traumatic experiences, we were all made to kneel and pray the rosary. Unbelievably, our family on the outside was viewed as one of the most endearing and model families in the community. We had outstanding social skills, like my father, and that seemed to cover our family secret very well. I left that situation 46 years ago. I was 18, totally messed up. I knew my life then was a lie. I had very poor self-esteem. Along life's way, I made many mistakes. Sometimes I'd make five strokes for the better, and then I'd have 15 letdowns follow. But I also was gifted by many loving individuals who helped me make better decisions. Little by little, slowly, over many years, developing more honesty with myself, speaking truthfully from within, building a stronger morality and ethics, I've been able to gradually transform the ugly scars to deeper joy and convictions of love and hope. I consider myself so blessed now to learn and journey with you. All of who we are. We light this chalice with the hope that we too may find a container for all of who we are. A holy chalice able to hold our courage and our fear, our gifts and our flaws, our joy as well as our pain. May we glimpse again what it means to be whole. May we find that peace of knowing that no part of us needs to hide. The first reading is Rise by Anna Lisa de Jong. I give up all that isn't me, although tomorrow I know I will try for it to be retrieved. But for today I give up what isn't mine to carry, or feel the weight of it upon my heart, as if my name were engraved. Yes, today I give up all that attempts to harness my mind, for the spirit loose can then float as it's meant. Like the gliding on a river, or as birds soaring in the air, the currents of life need our gracious bearing. Heads held high, eyes centered on what's ours, letting go of the things that God never fashioned. Yes, today I discard all that isn't me, and I find myself afresh in the freedom of this shedding. As today I lay down weights that would hamper my rise and realize again how close is heaven. The second reading is I Want to Unfold by Anne Lamott. Rilke wrote, I want to unfold. I don't want to stay folded anywhere, because where I am folded, there I am a lie. We got folded by trying as hard as we could to make everyone happy, to please everyone, and to fill every moment with productivity. Our grown-ups said this would bring approval, and approval would bring satisfaction, and they would like us more. But we learned to sabotage ourselves so that they wouldn't feel eclipsed. High achievement made the family look good, but also seemed to be another nail in Dad's coffin. We agreed to get folded at school and in jobs, to get ahead, shine the family star, fill our Swiss cheese holes. We got folded and fooled into airless states of accomplishment, estrangement from ourselves, squandering our very short lives. Then we folded ourselves so we wouldn't annoy or embarrass our kids. Self-importance, fueled by performance anxiety, people-pleasing, sloth, and bad self-esteem wrapped us into small, crisp squares like professionally laundered shirts. I was there this week. I liked it briefly because folded feels like home, small, familiar, hugged. I like smells of soap and steam and starch. Then it becomes oppressive and disorienting. Even a lot of caffeine and cheery new curtains don't help. You see, we got creased in those places such a long time ago that it seems hopeless to begin the great unfolding now. Our integrity got broken. I'm not sure we got strong at the broken places, although people love to say this happens.
My grandfather, who I preached about on Christmas Eve, if you were here, died this past Tuesday. He was 97, a long life. He was the plumber, Navy pilot, mechanic grandpa who was well-versed in engines and pipes and tools. He was also a Methodist who was also a pluralist, believing in many paths, which he was sure to tell me several times on my journey from Lutheranism to Unitarian Universalism. But this week, I was mostly remembering a phrase he would often say, especially a few years back after my grandmother had died. He would say it to both people he knew well or people he just now met and all of a sudden loved. He would say, "I can tell you are all heart." A lovely sentiment and compliment, and I also think to those who received it, a little daunting of an invitation and aspiration. Am I really? I don't think I am. I try to live by heart. Grandpa, I'm trying to live from some deep down core of your best self. It's like a phrase I often hear that makes so much sense to me of how people experience the world, at least how I do, that people remember not so much what you say, but they remember how you made them feel, right? We are primarily in this life and primarily in this world navigating our lives through a framework of the heart, feelings and emotions that are connected to intellect and intuition. But more than that, heart is about what's at our core. Our lives in this world are complicated, and it doesn't take long, as the poet says, to get folded by the world. Creased and folded into a smaller sense of self, a smaller sense of possibility or identity. We start off in this world filled with possibility, like a little piece of the Big Bang that we inhabit in this process of ongoing creativity we spoke about last week, that we're always at some beginning. And sometimes life can feel like that. There are moments when the world, or whatever threshold we've just crossed or are about to cross or are in, can feel so filled with possibility, like something is just unfolding right before us. Just now, some part of the world, some part of the future just being created. Because this whole life we are living in a process. We are always still working on it, figuring it all out, creating every moment and breath. But the world and life sometimes crashes in on us a bit and creates a bit more rigidity to categorize and classify and define and determine, to make things neat and orderly and pristine. And there can be something comforting about trying to present that pristine life to the world. As the poet says, I love the smell of soap and steam and starch, familiar, small, hugged. But then, she says, being folded gets oppressive, disorienting. It seems to me we get folded or creased, put in our place in so many ways in this life, or at least we can be, made to feel small or made to feel less than, both direct and indirect. Those folds on our spirit or our heart come in the forms of expectations, if we put them on ourselves or from others, in seemingly small or maybe large traumatic ways. Those are the moments where it can feel like the world is closing in, trying to define you, giving you messages that you don't measure up. There isn't space enough, room enough, love enough for you or your dreams or your identity or your hopes or just you at all. And when you are made to feel so small by the world, then what is integral to you? What is at your core and your heart? It feels like it's not given the room it needs, the pathways that it needs to radiate out into the world, to give you all it can, to give you life. It makes integrity a hard thing, how to embrace the deepest part of who we are, the deepest sense of self that is authentic, and to try to not let it become encumbered, clouded, made small. Try our hardest to live by heart and refuse to be defined or categorized, put in our place by something that is not our home. It can be hard sometimes to live into the words of Mary Oliver, who wrote, I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, she says, what's wrong with maybe? A few people, including our office administrator and others who stopped by my office this week, asked, is that really your sermon title for this week, or have you just not finished it yet? And the answer is yes, both, of course. And the reason is we are still working on it all the time. We wrestle with this theme of integrity, our monthly theme for the church in January, how to discuss integrity with meaning and depth, how to make it accessible and understandable to children of all ages, but really to all of us. The thing that our culture can too quickly do with integrity is define it as some static thing. To have integrity is to live or think just one way, always and consistently forever, and always act or think or believe in that same way. You see this in the political world all the time if you're a flip-flopper on issues, right? Which sometimes, I will say, can be a valid critique related to motivation for change, why you're changing your opinion or idea. But too often it expects a staticness about how we experience or view the world, a fixedness. You said this before, how could you possibly change your mind or your belief or your value? What I love about the phrase living by heart, or my grandfather's phrase of being all heart, is that there can be something that has integrity, that at its core has guiding principles or values or ways of being in the world that can shift and adapt and change all the time and have threads of integrity that run through it. Like the poet Stanley Kunitz writes, I've walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray. But when I look behind, as I'm compelled to look before I gather strength to proceed, I know I am not done with my changes. I'm not done with my changes. I love that phrase. And I love the phrase that some principle of being abides. It's like some thread that weaves through our soul, even as we adapt and shift and change in this world. Maybe that's what integrity is like. Some thread that keeps showing up in our lives that we aspire to inhabit more often. I think about this in my own life or in our culture. I think about this in our church. What are the threads that weave through Unitarianism and Universalism? I hope it's the open mind and the loving heart that we can trace back for generations, knowing that we in this tradition has not always been in full line with that and has made mistakes. But just like this tradition or any of us, what a gift it is to not be store-bought, mass-produced, pre-packaged, and inspected by some quality control agent for structural or identity integrity, to be the exact same as you were the moment you were born, to always stay the same somehow. What a gift that is. To know that one part of your story or one part of your identity, one perspective or idea or time in your life may change in an instant, or over years, or over a lifetime. Has that ever happened to you? Have you changed sometimes? I expect you have. Sometimes it's quick when all of a sudden you were certain or you were sure of something and one small thing's happen or one conversation happens or one experience just shifts and you realize something new or you find something you really hadn't paid attention to before and your perspective, your orientation toward the world just changes a little bit. What a gift it is that stories and identities and possibilities and relationships in the world change because what's wrong with maybe, writes the poet. That can be in some ways, at some times, a way of unfolding, realizing that. Trying to unfold our lives from the expectations placed upon us, pressed upon us, these assumptions of who we are or ought to be. Or in the words of the poet, I give up what isn't mine to carry. I give up what I don't want to feel the weight of on my heart. I discard all that isn't me, and I find myself afresh in this shedding. She says, as today I lay down the weights that would hamper my rise and realize again how close is heaven. Maybe some of you have seen episodes of The Good Place, where they are forced to make moral decisions in a warped afterlife. One of the main characters, Chidi, on Earth was a philosophy professor who struggles constantly with moral dilemmas, who knows them in his mind, how to think of different philosophers and how they thought about these ethical decisions, but struggles mightily with how to actually make really any decision. Throughout this series, part of the idea of morals and ethics is to have ethical integrity and not be robotic when you make decisions. To not make the exact same decision in every situation, but to have ethical integrity with what's called contextual ethics, or as Eleanor put it in The Good Place, moral particularism, to adapt to the situation, to know the context and the impact of those who are involved, and not only to think, well, I'm going to do the most good for the most amount of people as if it's always that clear and easy. But sometimes this world and we are much more complicated than that. And to have integrity in this world is not just to have prepackaged ways of being or thinking, but to be in the world in a way that consistently and always comes from the heart. To have integrity is to be led by where love is leading you, and to embrace the many ways that your heart can feel, and to know it's complicated. Knowing that we change moment to moment from one part of our life to another, one day, one breath to the next, and that isn't bad. In fact, to have integrity as a human maybe is to embrace change and to love that about us, even as it can cause havoc in our lives, but to always have our changes led by love in its deepest sense, to be all heart, to let your decisions, actions, energy be led by love and by kindness, by compassion, even as you know you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's all right. Recently, there's some activists online that were considering the state of the world, talking about and wondering about what we could possibly tell generations to come about how we've really screwed up the world in a lot of ways. What are we going to say about environmental degradation and the rise of hate crimes? Why couldn't we fix racism and sexism and xenophobia and transphobia? Why couldn't we fix and stop hatred or bigotry? How could we, with any integrity, offer them a world that seems so filled with despair sometimes. It was a pretty depressing feed for a while. But one hopeful response among many was from Rachel Kahn. She entitled it, "What to Tell the Children." This is some of what she wrote. Tell them that we humans have made some huge mistakes. And that's how we find ourselves where we are now. Teach them that hate is the poison and that love is the remedy. Tell them it is better to be ready for whatever comes next, even if it's painful to learn about something you didn't know. Tell them that there are paradigm shifts that happen, and that this is what happens to ineffective empires, we hope. Tell them that everything is not okay, and knowing that is okay. Tell them that pretending that what is unacceptable is fine is what got us here. And apologize for any prior attempts to teach them denial. Tell them that you were distracted from time to time by the desire for comfortable numbness. Express that you always had the best intentions, that you were working within a broken system that benefited a few at the expense of the many. And sometimes you just had to lay low to survive, or keep the status quo, or you played your role. But increasingly those days became over because you learned to know better and claim your power. Teach them to practice discernment. Tell them that authority and respect must be earned and not inherently deserved. Teach them that there are good and bad people from every background, ethnicity, and belief system, that they must align themselves with kindness, and they themselves will do good and bad things. You tell them that just because something is legal does not mean it is right. Remind them of the lawful atrocities in our history, and remind them of the people who spoke and acted against them. That Rosa Parks righteously broke a law and the world took notice. That Harriet Tubman is like a modern-day Moses. That women would not be allowed to vote if no one had made a noise and lifted their voice. Tell them that love can win this, but only if we remember that love is not just an unending cuddle puddle, but it is fierce, as a mother bear protecting her cubs. Tell them that although this existence is damaged beyond repair, they must not despair, because there's also possibility for healing at least some of it. And we will willingly and willfully open ourselves to new ways of being. Teach them that we and they are worth that. Tell them that we are not free while anyone else suffers. Teach them that we are all limbs of the same body. Teach them humility, but also to relearn and trust their own intuition. Remind them their gifts are useful, that they are beautiful, and that they are the truth. When I think about what to tell future generations, including some that live in my home, I'm not always quite so sure, but this is what I know, that we are still working on it. This world and our lives, and a lot of people have been working on it a long time, and we're not there yet. How to live our values and live them by heart. We're still working on it, and I think we always will be in some ways. And thank God we haven't arrived at the end yet, because there's so much more to do. There's a lot more to fix, but there's also a lot to savor. There's a lot to experience. There's more to change and more to enjoy and more to make new. There is more to each of us, more heart that we can still live by. I invite you, as you're comfortable, to join a hand next to you or place your hand on your heart. Breathe deep the breath of life. You are all heart, and we all are. And all heart means a lot of joy, and sometimes it means frustration or fear. Sometimes it means being uncertain. Sometimes it means being fierce, and sometimes it means being really tender. You're all heart, and what a blessing. Amen.